Good morning. Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and happy 1st of June. Unfortunately, Mercury's still retrograde, I think, for a few days. Anyway, it's an eternal question whether or not the spirits are real, objective, or completely subjective. Is magic real or is magic subjective? When we evoke demons into a triangle, are we evoking an objective entity with independent will, a spiritual entity, or are we invoking aspects of ourselves? Ultimately, both are correct as far as it goes. My car is parked out front here, and my car is an objective object. In a sense, it's an entity. But the entity that is the car is not in the metal and is not in the glass and the rubber, but in the fact that it is my chariot, my vehicle of transportation. It means there is a spirit in my car that actually is the reality of that car to me. And so the reality of my car is 100% subjective, as it is also objective. I make the car real. And ultimately, when we're talking about evocation and Solomonic magic, it's really, the question really doesn't make sense to force our little brains into the narrow avenue of reality and say these spirits are real. They're living in a hell and they're playing pinochle or bridge, just waiting for some magician to figure out the recipe, the formula to trap them, outsmart them. No. Ultimately, when you evoke a demon into a triangle, you're evoking yourself into a triangle, okay? And that's the simple secret. Now, I'm going to read a little something about Solomonic magic. But when you are faced with the question, are spirits real or imaginary? Are they objective or subjective? The answer is they are both up to a point, and the point is your own ability to actually comprehend that everything in your universe is subjective. Everything, with a big S. There's little subjective and little objective, okay? But there's also a big S subjective, that everything, including me, that you're watching on YouTube here or whatever, if you're looking at it, if you're perceiving it, if you're processing it, Lon Milo Duquette is a subjective reality to you, and it's all yours. And the secret of Solomonic magic is your realization that you are where the subjective, objective buck stops. There's an old Roman Catholic in-joke that says the best popes are atheists. Not meaning that the best popes don't believe in God. It's just the best popes realize that the objective idea of God that most people have doesn't exist. Okay. Have I confused you enough this morning? Hang on. The formula of Solomonic magic is very simple and uses the character of King Solomon as the mythological archetype of the ideal magician. There are many stories and traditions about Solomon that come from sources other than the Bible. An important part of the mythology of Freemasonry revolves around a particular story or a peculiar story of King Solomon and the building of his magnificent temple, a story that is not found in the Bible. The Quran, the Talmud, and the Ethiopian scriptures also abound with colorful tales of the great magician king who, because of his special relationship with God and his mastery of magic, could talk with animals, fly through the air on a magic carpet, and effect all manner of works and wonders, including his ability to enlist a labor force of demons and evil spirits to build the great temple of God. The likelihood that the biblical King Solomon probably never existed in empirical history should be of no concern to modern magicians, because the formula for doing this kind of magic isn't an aspect or product of history or religion, but of the mythology and traditions that are attached to Solomon's name. The magical myth goes something like this. When Solomon became king, his first job was to build a temple worthy to house the presence of the true and living God Most High, something his father David hadn't been able to do so. Before beginning the project, Solomon paused and thought things over and wisely came to the conclusion that he couldn't undertake such an important task without the blessing and guiding intelligence of God. In prayer, Solomon didn't ask for money or building materials or contractors. He simply asked for an understanding heart. Now, I'm going to digress into Kabbalistic thought for a second. In Kabbalistic biblical literature, the word understanding and the word wisdom have certain very, very pronounced Kabbalistic meanings. Understanding is the title of number 3, Sephirah number 3 on the Tree of Life, above the abyss in the supernal triad. Number 3, Binah, is understanding. And the word wisdom, when it appears in Kabbalistic biblical literature, often is referring to the title of number 2 in the supernal triad, Hokmah. Hokmah is wisdom. And it's also the initiatory degree of Magus. Both of them above the abyss. Both of them levels of consciousness so high that all sense of duality has been obliterated. Hokmah Binah, the consciousness of Buddha, the consciousness of nirvana, the consciousness of the dissolution of all that duality does not exist anymore. But I digress. Solomon didn't ask for money or building material or contractors. He simply asked for an understanding heart. How cool was that? It impressed God so much that Solomon was granted his request and given everything else to boot, including the divine secrets of how to magically summon the evil spirits of the world and diverting them from their natural preoccupation with mischief and compel them to work for the good guys and help build the great temple. Now, the good guys and the temple and all of that stuff is stuff that's happening below the abyss, okay, where there is perceived duality. But Solomon raised his consciousness to above the abyss, to the supernal triad. He asked for understanding heart and wisdom. That's where it's happening. Then everything else taking place below that is under that divine control. On the surface, this spiritual worldview appears to be at odds with the Chrysalmu doctrine we discussed in the previous chapters. Chrysalmu, Christian, Muslim, and Jew. We've got God up above and we've got demons down below, but it appears that's where the similarity ends. In fact, the whole format of Solomonic magic appears to be an incongruous mixture of high and low magic. The key to understanding this paradox lies with the person of Solomon himself. Solomon represents a new kind of human, identifying with a new kind of human consciousness, I might add. A person who has broken free of the old ways of looking at God and our place in creation. A person whose consciousness has expanded beyond the prison universe of good gods and evil devils. A person who grasps the concept of a supreme consciousness so absolute that all forces and powers of creation, even those that to others appear evil and destructive, are pressed into service of the great G goodness. A true Solomon confidently knows his or her place in this new understanding of the divine scheme of things. A true Solomon is a proactive, full citizen of both heaven and hell. A true Solomon is in fact encouraged by the great G, God Almighty, to conjure the devils and put them to work doing good things. Are you confused? Don't be. You've just learned a fundamental secret of magic, and if you can free yourself from the old Chrysalmu way of looking at things, you are well on your way to becoming a true Solomon yourself. The best popes are atheists. Let me put this in less romantic terms. The nature of existence is consciousness. We are conscious beings, each of us an integral part of the whole consciousness enchilada. There are levels of consciousness and realities above the one in which we normally function and identify with, actually. And there are levels of consciousness below the one we're identifying with. As yogis, mystics, adepts, and adept magicians can attest, we can access the higher levels of consciousness in meditation or under other extraordinary circumstances. In those altered states, we not only realize the oneness of the Supreme Consciousness, we become one with the oneness of the Supreme Consciousness. Ultimately, this transcendent state is our true natural state of being, our true self. It's who we really are. It is the heaven where we dwell when we have fulfilled our adventures pretending we are somehow disconnected from the Supreme Consciousness. Our ascent into higher consciousness is Solomon's prayer to God. Solomon going up to be in the presence of deity. However, because most of us have not yet played out our adventure of dreaming we are separate entities, we can abide these altered states for only fleeting seconds before once again descending into the middle, muddled world of the rational mind, which in turn is supported by the infernal world of matter and energy at the lowest end of the consciousness scale. It's a place where the blind forces of nature, if left uncontrolled and undirected, happily discharge their wild energy in explosive flashes that surge through the streets and sewers of our souls along the paths of least resistance. From our narrow middle world perspective, these blind forces appear to be destructive and evil. However, when they are harnessed and directed by an intelligence that is in tune with the highest levels of consciousness, they are transformed into organized units of constructive power. Loyal servants, dutifully grunting and straining to perform all the heavy lifting in the universe. These are the demons who build the temple of God. Demons Solomon draws up from hell so that he might bind them to work under his enlightened and organized direction. For the magician, archangels, angels, spirits, intelligences, and demons are merely colorful metaphors for the cascading hierarchy of all the natural forces and energies in the universe. This is the secret of Solomon. Once we've really pounded it into our heads, we recognize that we too have our unique place in the universe. Proactively operating halfway between above and the below, we are poised to connect with and become charged by the force of the stratum of consciousness above us, so that we may connect with and master and direct the forces of the stratum beneath us. For the magician, the energy flow of the Solomonic formula moves perpetually upwards. The magician's consciousness rises to connect with the divine consciousness, earth up to heaven, to become attuned with the divine perfection, and the demon is made to rise up from hell to earth, to become controlled and directed by the magician. From the demon's point of view, the magician is God. And as long as the magician's link with the above is true and sure, so too is the demon's link with the magician. And it's the magician who will make the subjective demon an objective reality in the magician's work. And the best popes are atheists. That's it for today. Yeah, I've covered this subject many times, but the it's very important, and I don't want to dismiss the fact that I practice Solomonic magic. I do all the doodads and follow the basic formula of medieval Solomonic magic. The fact that ultimately in the back of my mind I realize that it's all a subjective operation, and no matter how objectively the results of my magic seem to become, sometimes miraculously awesome, nevertheless, it's not because it's not ultimately my own subjective results in my own subjective universe, because that's all I've got. That's all you've got. Until tomorrow, hopefully. Happy first day of June, everyone. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.